Professor John Mew, who's very kindly allowed us into his castle. I'm sure he's going to tell us all about his exploits in the motoring field, but also maybe about some of the things he built this castle himself. So there's quite a lot of work involved in that. So I'll hand over to John. Thank you.
Well, I don't know where you want me to start. I mean, is this about me, about what I've done, or about cars, or about building?
About you first, I think. How about that?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to fill you in. To some extent, it might be better if you ask the questions, but I'll give you a brief background. My father was an orthodontist, and he graduated in 1921. I followed him and graduated in 53. And my son, who I think will arrive fairly soon, followed me and graduated, I think, in 90-something, 3 or 4, I believe. Anyway, so we go professionally more than 100 years. But I've always had, what shall I say, original ideas. And they usually get you into trouble. Well, that's very true. And people who think differently, by and large, are welcome with any society. But we rub along, and every now and again we actually change it. But there we are. I was brought up in Tunbridge Wells, and on the edge. I was born in 1928, which does seem a long time ago now. And I don't think anything in particular happened as a kid, but they started a war when I was about 9, and that was quite exciting because Tunbridge Wells was on the route from France to London, and all the German bombers were coming over. We actually got bombed out of our house 3 times. So, you know, it did affect us, but no injuries. I can remember on one occasion they dropped a bomb in the garden. It blew all the windows in front, and quite amazingly, all the windows out at the back. It's quite strange, isn't it? Anyway. And I was actually asleep on the dining room floor because they didn't think it was safe to be upstairs. And despite the nearness of the bomb, I didn't actually wake up. But, you know, you were so used to bangs and bumps all night that, well, you can imagine a 9-year-old kid. I thought it was all great fun. I could actually remember watching the planes shoot each other down out of my bedroom window. And, you know, to a 9-year-old, it was great fun. But there we are. After the war, when I was 16, it was actually before the end of the war, I volunteered as a dispatch rider, transferring messages around. I was too young to join the army, but at 16 you could join the civil defence. So I was actually a dispatch rider, and my job was when the V2s landed. You don't know what they are. They were the rockets. When they landed with a bump, you didn't know they were coming. And so they needed to know what damage had been done. So they'd send someone off to look, and that was my job. Rushing off to these bomb sites and reporting on them, basically. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think I was at high risk of damage, probably more so than most of the troops in the trenches, but at my own hand, which I don't suppose counts. Anyway, I did come off innumerable times. Then when I got to 17, I bought an old Lagonda, a 1680. I don't know if anyone knows. Are there any old car people here much? Not really. Anyway, one part had blown up on the end of the camshaft, and I bought the whole car for £5. I managed to get the camshaft repaired. Well, they machined another bit and sliced it on the end. Quite clever stuff. And I then did it up. This was at the age of, 17? And I did a good job, actually. And I repainted it and put a new fabric roof on it. And I managed to sell it for £275, which to an 18-year-old was a lot of money. Back then, anyway. I then actually, 2 or 3 years later, I built my own car. When I think back on it, I actually think that was a greater achievement than building this, because I really had nothing to start with. I just welded bits of metal together and made an ash frame, and it was total DIY. I just got better at it as I went along. And in the end, it really didn't look too bad. To give it a bit of interest, I put the engine out of a tank into it. A 4.5 litre V8. And to improve the things, I added Highlish camshafts, double Weber carburetors, and high compression head. So it actually delivered a lot of power. I think I'm quite proud of the fact that the first event I took it to was a speed trial at Brands Hatch. And I won fastest time of the day. This was the first event in a homemade car, and I was only, 21, 22 at the time. So I pat myself on the back more, really, than I do for this, because the car was really complete. All the doors opened and shut, the roof went up and down, as good as most of your 7, believe me. Only with a bit more urge.
I think you had fun welding it, didn't you?
Well, what else of interest? I don't think, I didn't get married till I was 35, so that was a later event. I started motor racing in a 500cc Cooper. Do any of you know it was the original Formula 3, which started in 56, I think. Fortunately, and this has been true all my life, I just happened by sheer luck to buy a very good car. It was a Cooper Mark 8, and it was the forerunner, really, of the first trailing suspension cars, which later were adopted by Colin Chapman for Lotus. And it was really the first of that whole breed of car. And it went very fast, with the result that without a great deal of skill or difficulty, I managed to get reasonable results in that. I raced in that for 3-4 years, and then they introduced Formula Junior at the time. Well, by then I got to know Colin Chapman quite well, and also Eric Broadbent, who made the Lola, if any of you know that. Yeah. I actually ordered a Lola from Eric, but he was so slow in delivering it that I switched to a Lotus 18, if any of you know that. It was a trailing link suspension again, and it was way above everything else. With the result, without really trying again, I could get near the front. and I had that for a couple of years. Sold it. By then I was finding my motor racing expenses a bit high, so I thought, I know what I'll do, I'll buy a garage. Well, I couldn't find a garage to buy, so I actually created a garage. It still exists actually, in Tunbridge Wells, and I called it the Sports Car Garage. And we had quite a good clientele, with some really fascinating cars. If I think of all the cars that I owned and sold there, and if I kept them all, I would certainly be a multi-billionaire, I think. They're, really interesting cars. I can remember buying a Rolls 20, which was built in 1922. Guess what it cost? 100 quid. And I remember selling it 2 years later for 110 quid. I'm thinking I'd done very well. There we are, I wonder what it's worth now. Anyway, I continued doing my dental job, but also running this garage. And it was quite a challenge, but we became Lotus agents, so I was selling Lotuses to people all around the place, and of course able to get a discount on them myself. And I then got a Lotus 20 and subsequently updated it to a Lotus 22. Initially I was doing mainly round the circuits at brands, but later on I decided to do a European tour, which went very well. If any of you want to ask me questions about any of these events, I could tell you, racing on the European circuits in those days was huge fun. I had a Dormobile caravan with a trailer, and I'd take my girlfriend and a mechanic to do the circuits. On other occasions, I can remember I'd send the mechanic, two of them, over ahead of me to the circuits, and I'd continue working, and then fly across them the day before practice to be at the circuit. But the starting money in those days was really good. The teams didn't exist. It was before the days of the various different motor racing teams. We were all individual private owners. When I left in 60s, 7, 8, 9, then the teams were coming in. But at that time there were no teams. And because I got the right cars, we actually didn't do badly. And actually, you'd be amazed, on some seasons actually made money just out of the prize and starting money, just covering all the costs on top of that. Anyway, where have I got to now? Yes, I'll chat about individual races. I broke the lap record a couple of times at Branch Hatch. Did reasonably well elsewhere. It was at that point my wife expected our first child, and I thought perhaps I should stop motor racing. It was very unsafe in those days. I motor raced quite intensively for 10 years, and I reckon that half the drivers I was competing against were either killed or seriously damaged. So motor racing is so safe now. I'm amazed you watch the most horrendous accidents at high speeds, and nobody's harmed. If anybody's interested, they can go into the kitchen, and at the far end on the right, there's a photograph of one of my several accidents where the car actually shot into a bank and rolled 6 times. You were either lucky to be thrown out at the beginning, or maybe trapped in at the end. I was trapped in, the whole of the front of the car collapsed and trapped my legs. So as I was going round and round like that, I was still in the car. But somewhere I got my crash helmet, which got a slit about this long. So, you know, things are just very dangerous. When I did a long distance race, there was no room for the petrol, so Colin Chapman, dear chap, created a special petrol tank which fitted around your seat. So you were actually sitting in a tank full of petrol, separated by a few millimetres of aluminium. But there we are. After that, I actually got quite seriously involved in sailing. Now, are any of you sailors here? No, I'll skip that chapter. But I actually, in terms of success, achieved more sailing than I did motor racing. But that, as I say, is another story. It is a fascinating sport, sailing, for those of you who haven't tried, because it's a mixture of physical ability and mental ability. When you're motor racing, things are so quickly. If you make a mistake, it's a twitch, and it's all over in a second or two. But in sailing, you can be in a really difficult situation for hours, sometimes even days, certainly if you're in the middle of a big ocean. But I'll leave it at that. Anyone wants to ask me questions, I'll happily answer them. Having got to that point in my life, I then concentrated on my profession, and I created a totally new form of treatment, which I thought was brilliant, but strangely enough, my colleagues totally disagreed with it. Not minor, but major. I carried on, I think, doing very well, but they thought very badly. And 3-4 years ago, they actually took my license away, said you can't practice anymore, which is quite a severe penalty, particularly considering I'd done all I could to really try and help, the world and my profession. But that was that. Now, as far as the castle's concerned, I'm really no more than a DIY man. I'm sure all of you are the same. These days, you have to be. And men start off with the odd tap washer, and then maybe migrate to fitting a new tap, and gradually take on more and more things. The one thing I did learn about DIY is the first time you did it, you usually did it wrong. But the second time, you got it a bit better. And by the time you'd done it half a dozen times, you were quite good at it. And that really is the history of the castle too. I did up several houses, mainly just because I couldn't afford what I wanted. The first house I bought for, I think, 8,500. That was in Wadhurst, a village near here. And that went okay, and we lived there for about 25 years. When I sold it, I think things had changed a bit because I sold it for $250,000. All right, I had done quite a bit to the house, and I think that looked every bit as nice as the other houses I've done. But I then saw a farm for sale. That was this farm. It was quite a sizable farm at the time, and the main house had not been lived in for 20 years. And the roof was finished, and there were actually trees growing up through the earth floor. So that was what you might say a state of disrepair. But because of that, I got it very cheaply. I never had any money, so I had to. And I then spent a year doing it up. During this, the whole family, and by then I'd been married about 25 years, and the whole family lived in the top of one of the barns, with one big room with a separate bathroom and a big pile of mattresses. So depending on how many people wanted a bed, we just pulled out enough mattresses and put them on the floor. And we lived like that for a year. Then we moved into the house. It was a lovely house. It's still there, only a quarter of a mile away. You probably saw it as you came down the lane. It was on your left. But look on the right, it is a beautiful house, if I say so. At that point, I had walked around the farm and we were keeping cows and sheep at the time. I was what you might call a hobby farmer, because I never really knew anything about farming. Are there any farmers here? No? Right, don't know what you all do. Anyway, I kept up, we did reasonably well. I could actually remember winning a prize for one of our cows at the local agricultural show. But generally I was a useless farmer, but it's a lovely occupation, one might say, even if you can't make money from it. And at that point, I had earmarked this particular spot because, you know, when you came in the entrance between the two stone walls, if you stand there and look, it is a lovely spot. It's crying out for something special. Well, you may know that this is an area of natural beauty, and therefore there is no new building allowed here at all. And so I knew I couldn't build something, but I decided I would make a lake. So I dug a lake. That actually took me 3 years to dig that lake. Sadly, it's rather filling up with mud and deposit now. But the challenge, I thought, was to be able to build something. Fortunately, in the woods, about a quarter of a mile up that way, there was a ruined cottage. It had been empty for 100 years or more, but it was still sort of standing. And so I applied to have it repaired. And after some humming and hawing, the council said yes. So I had permission to build something. I then thought to myself, I know, I don't want to build it in the middle of the woods. I'd like to build it here, which is about, as I say, a quarter of a mile away. So I said to the council, can I move the cottage from where it is to where I'd like it to be? Again, after a certain amount of humming and hawing, they said yes. So I then had permission to build something on this spot, beside the lake, which by then I more or less finished, in the most idyllic situation. So I thought to myself, what shall I build? I could build a sort of bungalow or a mansion or something. But I wanted to make the countryside look better, not worse. Do you know, that's quite a challenge, you know, almost all buildings look, I think, a bit unattractive to begin with. And certainly if you've got a beautiful view, most of them spoil it. Anyway, as you conclude, I decided it would look best to build a castle. Now the council took a bit longer to agree. But eventually they did. As you can see, it's here now. I was then faced with, well, I've got permission, how do I build it? I used an architect to get permission because I thought that would be the best approach. But having got permission, I thought, I don't think I want an architect. Architects, by and large, think it's their job to tell you what to do. And I don't usually get on with them, because I think it's my job to tell them what to do. But anyway, so I decided to build it without an architect, and just using my imagination. I did spend a lot of time trundling around the countryside looking at old buildings, castles of one sort or another. What you see here really is a mix of Bodiam Castle, I'm sure some of you must know that, Ightham Moat, of Hever Castle, and what's the one down towards Maidstone?
Leeds.
Which?
Leeds.
That's it, yes. But, this really is a mix of all of them. But I thought, if I'm doing this, I want to do it right. And so I really went to great lengths to make it as genuine as I could. And I've actually fooled experts with it. I think one of the finishing touches was to put the Elizabethan section tilting over into the moat. I don't know if any of you noticed that when you came, but that corner of the building is tilted over like this. Do you know, I don't know of anyone in the world who's ever done that before. Why not? Because it definitely adds to the appeal. And yet everybody seems to build square houses. Anyway, so I wanted to do a faithful reproduction. You would know that a chap called William landed at Hastings in 1066, which is not far from here actually. He then came up this way through this area, fought his the next battle at Saxonbury, which is not far again from here. So we know that he was all round this area. After he'd won his victory, his various knights wanted to settle down and live a normal life among the English that they'd overcome. But of course, they weren't exactly popular. So most of them would have to build themselves a defensive position. And as they were in quite a hurry, the first way they did it would be to create an island where they would have a measure of water between them and any possible enemy. Then later on, they would build defensive buildings. Initially, most of them built a hall, a bit like this. Some of them quite a bit larger, but some of them no larger than this. Then, when in the time of the Stephens and the Plantagenets, if you remember your history, the Plantagenets came along, they really weren't well organised at all. There were no laws much, and everybody really just lived on their own defence. So if you had property, you had to defend it. And the best way to defend it was to build a tower, like we have there, where you have the circular staircase is the only way of access. The ground floor is open, nothing there. But to get to any of the rooms, you have to go up a circular staircase. That is what the Plantagenets did, and that is a Plantagenet tower. Later on in the 1600s, or 15 and 16, England became much more safe. The Elizabethans built them what you could really call accommodation blocks for their servants, and that would be the timber section, which I built there. And so, like most houses, even today, people add and improve to them. We all do that. People have done that throughout history. And so in the one building, you have the Norman, the Plantagenet, and the Elizabethan sections. But that's just to help you understand. I managed to get hold of a stonemason who was really good. He was used to working on churches, and all this stonework here was done by him. And I employed him for 2 years, and I had a bricklayer I employed for 3 years. But those are the only people I employed to help me. I did have contracts for something. I had a contract for this hammer beam roof. I wanted a hammer beam roof. You know, the normal things were tie beams across from one wall to the other. But I think a hammer beam roof looks so much more attractive. And that's done with this double loop at the top. Westminster Hall is done the same. So I had people in to do different jobs for me, but I still did a lot myself. I had someone do the electrics, someone else do the plumbing, someone else do various of the timber sections. But mainly, I with my bricklayer and stonemason, and I might add the rest of my family, my wife, who really worked hard, my 2 sons and daughter, all of them played a major part. And the big problem was actually resourcing. You can't go to your local builder's yard and say, I'll have some medieval windows. And these stones, the floor, came from a church in Tunbridge Wells. Now, I could have probably bought new paving stones, but I think by buying old ones, it gives the whole place a feeling of natural age. The windows were real heavy because, again, you can't buy windows like that. I had to go to reclamation yards, and I did find a nice set of windows, and the builder put them all on pallets ready for me to collect. And then he phoned me up to say, John, they've been stolen. So I then had to find 4 more, and I got these 4, but it took me, well, I wrote to every single church diocese and to every single reclamation agent in the country, and eventually got these 4, and nearly lost them too. And I managed to get hold of the windows which had been in them. Of course, they're now a totally different size, therefore I had to remake all the windows. And that took quite an effort, but I learned how to do this leaded light stuff. Anyway, now what else can I tell you about? I think I've more or less finished telling you about all these important things anyway. Is there another aspect of my life you want to know about? Or would you just like me to answer some questions? Or would you rather wander around under Ian's excellent...
Anybody got any questions for John?
I'll tell you a little about the actual construction. Each of those uprights came from a single tree, which I had a friend who owned a lot of oak trees. And do you remember the great storm of '87? Yes. A lot of them were knocked down, but they were inaccessible, so he just left them. And I said to him, look, Trevor, I would like those trees. Do you mind if I grab them? If I cut them up and sort them out, you can have half the timber and I'll have the other half. So he said, yeah, okay. And with the result that I got all my timber very cheaply. But each of those uproots, it took me about a couple of days just to do the moulding, if you know what I mean, the ridges. They're a replica of 1400 timber, which is about the date that I wanted to represent here. And the heads on the top of the column, they took about a couple of days to carve too. once again you'll see the DIY trait. That one there was the first one I did, and that one there was the last one I did. Definitely getting better. What I discovered was that you don't make the face in the bit that's facing down, you do it diagonally like that. Then you've got much more wood to play with. This one here, by the time I got to his chin, there was no room. He doesn't actually have a chin.
Are they anyone in particular?
The which?
Are they anyone in particular?
No, not that this. She's supposed to be a cherub, whatever a cherub looks like. I got, reasonably good at carpentry. The length of table there, I made that tabletop there, and basically the secret is to buy some bloody good bits of wood. That tabletop hasn't moved, I don't think, 1 millimetre since I made it. And I deliberately aged it. I can remember doing that. I would hold my toolbox about 6 feet up in the air, then tip it upside down, and all the tools would fall out on the tabletop with lots of dents and bits, and I paint all the dents black, so that it looks like an old table. But, you get used to these cheats of one sort or another. I might add that the acoustics here are fabulous. If any of you belong to an opera group, you're welcome to come and sing here. You've got a musician's gallery up there. Those are portraits of early muse. The one in the middle is my great-grandfather. The one on the left is my great-great-grandfather. The one on the right, the great-great-great. So it goes back quite a long way, all said and done. Well, I think I'm out of time.
You had a story about a welder making your own welder.
Well, yes. When I built my car, needless to say, I had to join all the bits of metal together. As you would all know, you have to weld to do that. Well, I was a penniless student, and I couldn't afford a welder, so I thought, well, I'd better make one myself. Fortunately, you can make your own acetylene by buying calcium carbide and adding water to it. That will generate acetylene. So I did that very simply, and I just stored the acetylene in a rubber ball about the size. I put the rubber ball in a cardboard box with several heavy weights on it, so that gave me acetylene under pressure. My father was, as I told you, an orthodontist, and so he had a gas machine at his practice where I could get oxygen. I should have had a reducing valve, as you may know, but I found that if I just opened the needle valve very little, I control the oxygen. Anyway, I then had to make my own gun, which I took just a bit of copper tube of, about 5/8 the internal dimension. Is that no, less than that, 3/8. And then I put a smaller bit of copper tube in the middle. And I ran the oxygen down the small one and the acetylene down the large one. And I had an acetylene machine, and I did all my own welding with it. But it's just a question of needs must. But Ian, what would you like me to do?
Has anybody got any questions for John while we're sitting around?
What year did you start?
Yes. Well, whoever.
Go on, Debbie.
What car was it that you had the bad accident in that you unfortunately weren't thrown out of? Because that's usually how people save their lives, being thrown out. Where you had the helmet, you were resting on the helmet. Which car was that?
He said that the car that I built, you mean?
No, the car you had the accident in, the roll.
Oh, right. Well, you go and have a look. That was a Lotus 22 with a 2-litre Formula Libre engine in it. There's a story behind it. There's a story behind everything. In practice, my rev counter had gone wrong. I think I know now why, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, so I wasn't able to do any practice because I knew the circuit very well, and because the the chap in charge knew me. He said, "Okay, you can start, but you'll have to go to the back of the grid." So I said, "Yep, okay." So I went to the back of the grid, and I was really trying to go too fast to catch up. I mean, you would, wouldn't you? I just overdid one of the bends called the... this is my son, Michael. And by the way, my brother, Peter, is down the end there. Where have I gone? Oh, yes. So I could try to tackle the S's too quickly, shot off, hit the bank, and rolled 6 times. But you could, by chance, a press photographer was on the side and caught all of that.
Oh, wow.
So there are a series of 6 pictures. They don't show every revolution, but I counted that as 6. But there we are. It's part of motor racing. And I was lucky not to kill myself. Certainly the slit in my crash helmet. You had a question.
I was going to ask, what year did you start building the castle, and how long did it take?
I started, I think, in 91 or 2, and finished it in 98, really. And I was still adding bits to it. I built the entrance towers there later than that. That was more or less the period. It took a long time.
It's really good.
That's quite amazing. So you were in your 60s when you started doing that?
70. You know, I was reasonably fit. I can remember the stone stairs that you see there. They weighed just short of 200 men each. And they're a real job to get up and put in position. When you want to build a circular staircase, all you do is just put one step on top of the other, like that. I actually initially went to a quarry and asked them what it would cost to cut me. I think it was 90 steps. And it would have cost more than the whole castle itself. So I thought, crikey, what do I do? And I then found a firm who make moulded shapes for you. They, I think perhaps inadvisedly, said, well, do come and have a look. So I went down to their firm, and I could see they were creating these moulds, and then they pour concrete and iron into them, but just a surface of artificial stone. And I thought to myself, that doesn't look very difficult. So I came back here, and I and my wife made every one of the steps into 2 times. And it took a long time, about 2 days to make each step. Anyway, you know, if you set yourself a challenge, in a sense, there is a reward in achieving it. Yeah. I can remember at the end of each day, I take 20 minutes off just to look at what I'd done that day. Anything else?
What prompted you to take up sailing?
For what?
What prompted you to take up sailing?
Because I wanted an exciting sport. And I thought that I'm less likely to kill myself. As I said, my wife had just become pregnant for the first time. So I took up, I think, sailing in probably what is the most exciting boat of the time. Well, last weekend I went down there. If you've ever heard of an International 14, they are very exciting boats. They're tiny little boats with an absolutely huge sail. And they're so top heavy that you can't sit them in the water, they fall over. The only way you can keep them up is moving your own weight around. And it attracts the very top helmsman in the world, with the result that it is incredibly exciting and challenging. And I think I got more excitement out of that than I did out of motor racing.
Anyone else? Any questions? Yeah.
I would like to know how do you learn the skill, all these skills, for example, sculpting, how do you learn it?
Well, my job is creating faces. That is what I do in dentistry. So I take people with unattractive faces, mainly children, and guide the growth so as to make the face look attractive. So I knew quite a bit about faces. And I took carpentry lessons at school. I was never any good at it, but you know, after a while you get better and better. As I say, I started with that one and finished with that one. You can probably work out the order that I did the rest in. I just got better. You know, if you apply yourself, you usually do.
I'll come in so I can hear you better.
Right. I think I'm finished.
Is that it? Anyone else?
He's another one. I've stopped changing faces now, but he's still doing it. And it's a fascinating work. If you catch him on the side, he'll tell you about it.
Yes, it's a touch controversial. So what's your group? It's a...
They're all with, well, do you know the Lotus 7?
Yes.
Do you know the Caterham 7?
Well, I live not far from Caterham, and we used to hang out with the Nerns.
Right, well, he knew them. Yes. He was at school with Simon.
So we're hanging, it was two brothers, wasn't it?
Robbo, yeah.
Robbo, the older one. Robert, I used to sail with,
Right.
and he was a couple of years above me, and we didn't get on. Sorry. But I think,
He's changed a lot.
well, if you've got some squirt a couple of years below you,
Yeah.
we sailed together, and I was better at sailing than him. So sorry, we didn't get on. But Simon, I think, shared a room with my brother at Homewood House, and I live not far from Caterham now, which is a shame because it's not the Caterham 7 isn't there anymore, is it?
Well, it's obviously not there anymore. No.
Peter, can you add anything on the Caterham 7?
Well, it's a picture of one.
This is my brother.
John had a Caterham, I put it together. And it stayed together. No, it's a nice
Well,
car, but
Bill had a Caterham, didn't he? You mentioned that, did you?
No, it wasn't a Caterham, it was another make. I
It
don't
was a
know.
Lotus 7 which you assembled. We bought
Yeah.
it from Colin.
No. Also, Peter, my brother, had
Your
a.
brother had a Westfield.
Well, that was right. Sorry. Oh, does that not go down so well?
And I subsequently had a Westfield. And you have to bear in mind, the law said it was as good as a Lotus. They got caught for copying. So it didn't be that bad. And the one I had, it went. Hell far.
But I would drive my brother's Westfield, and I've never been something that went accelerated as fast. Well, except a motorbike. But.
Yeah, mine would have faster.
So dare we ask what engine your Westfield had?
My brother's Westfield,
Oh, your brother's
Ford Pinto 2 litre.
Sorry?
Ford Pinto
Oh.
2 litre.
2 litre.
But the gearing ratio wasn't very good. So the problem is that the engine was only ever ticking over whatever speed you were going. It should have been revved a little bit. The gear ratio should have been a bit. So So you were doing more revs at Freddy speed.
I think
But since it
had-
was 2 litre, it didn't really matter.
Wasn't the Pinto engine quite high though? Or
A friend of mine built it, and then my brother bought it off him after he built it. I have no idea. But it was the gear ratios were a little bit off. But you know, you'd be going down the motorway and it was just literally ticking over. But it didn't really matter because you got 2 litres on a couple of kilos of car.
yeah.
Okay, well, unless anyone's got any more questions, thank you very much, John.
A pleasure.
Yeah, lovely.